I never thought standing my ground would shatter my entire world. For 4 years, I kept the peace, compromised my dreams, and slowly erased who I really was to keep her happy. Then came the ultimatum that changed everything. It's either me or them. What she didn't expect was a man who'd finally reached his breaking point. The look on her face when I refused to bend. Priceless. But the aftermath? That's where the real story begins. My name is Shane Clark. I'm 35 years old and work as a rescue patroller at Eagle Peak, one of Colorado's premier ski resorts. I've spent the last decade pulling stranded skiers out of trouble, stabilizing broken bones on mountainsides, and occasionally dealing with the aftermath of avalanches. It's intense work, but there's nothing like the rush of saving someone who thought they were done for. When I'm not on the mountain, I co-host a podcast called Peak Survival with my two best friends, Jack and Reed. We talk about outdoor adventures, survival stories, and emergency preparedness, stuff that might save someone's life someday. I met Allison 4 winters ago, during what we call Hell Week at the resort, that stretch between Christmas and New Year's when a mountain is packed with holiday tourists who have no business on advanced slopes. She had taken a nasty fall on a black diamond run, and I was first on the scene. Nothing was broken, thankfully, but she had a sprained ankle that needed attention. "Are you the angel of death?" she joked through gritted teeth as I worked on stabilizing her ankle. "Because this feels like I'm dying." "Nah, just a regular guy who's seen enough twisted ankles to open a pretzel factory," I replied, securing the wrap. Her laugh made something stir in my chest, something that had been dormant for a long time. Allison Winters, 33, with auburn hair that caught fire in the sunlight and a quiet intensity in her green eyes. A literary translator who could speak 4 languages but claimed she was absolutely useless at skiing. I helped her down the mountain that day, and, somehow, we ended up talking for hours at the lodge afterward. She was staying at Eagle Peak for 2 weeks, translating a Russian novel while her friend tackled the expert slopes. "Most people come here to ski, not to work," I said, sliding a hot chocolate toward her. "Most people can't spend 2 hours talking to a ski patroller when they should be working," she countered with a smile that reached all the way to her eyes. 2 weeks turned into regular visits to Colorado. Visits turned into weekend stays. Stays turned into Allison relocating her freelance business to be closer to Eagle Peak, to be closer to me. I fell hard and fast. We both did. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. The first year was perfect. The kind of relationship you see in movies and think, that's not real. But it was. We'd spend weekends exploring mountain trails in summer and skiing together in winter. She improved dramatically under my tutelage. Evenings were spent by the fireplace in my cabin, her translating beside me while I edited podcast episodes. When we argued, it was passionate but fair. When we made up, it was even better. I didn't notice how things started to change. How small, innocuous comments about my friends became pointed criticisms. How her smile would tighten when I mentioned recording sessions. How our time slowly began to eclipse my time until there was almost nothing left that was just mine. That's the thing about avalanches, both the snowy kind and the relationship kind. They don't just happen out of nowhere. The conditions build slowly, layer upon unstable layer, until all it takes is one wrong move to bring everything crashing down. That first year with Allison felt like catching a perfect powder day, rare, exhilarating, and something you want to hold on to forever. We fell into a comfortable rhythm, spending weekends exploring mountain trails and evenings huddled by the fireplace in my cabin. She'd curl up with her translations while I edited podcast episodes, occasionally interrupting each other with interesting snippets from our work. "Shane, listen to this line," she'd say, eyes bright with excitement. The Russian author describes snow in 14 different ways in this paragraph alone. I'd pause my editing to appreciate the poetry of it, then share a survival story that had come across my desk. We were partners in the truest sense. My friends like her too, especially Jack and Reed. They welcomed her into our social circle without hesitation, inviting her along on group hikes and to backyard BBQs. The 4 of us would sometimes grab dinner after podcast recordings, talking and laughing until the restaurant staff started giving us pointed looks about closing time. "You hit the jackpot with this one, Clark," Jack told me one night when Allison had stepped away. "Smart, funny, and she actually laughs at your terrible jokes. Plus, she hasn't run screaming from your disaster stories," Reed added. That's a keeper quality right there. I nodded, watching her chat with the waitress. I know. Trust me, I know. But around our 1-year mark, something shifted. It happened so gradually I almost didn't notice. Allison started asking more questions about my time away from her. Not in an accusatory way, at least not at first, but with a curiosity that felt different. What exactly do you guys talk about for 3 hours? She asked one night after I returned from a podcast recording. Same as always. Emergency protocols, survival stories, gear reviews. I replied, kissing her forehead. We're thinking about doing a series on avalanche safety. And that takes 3 hours. Her tone was light, but her eyes watched me carefully. Well, we got sidetracked talking about Jack's new rescue dog. You know how it goes. She nodded and let it drop, but something had changed. The next week, when I mentioned heading to Reed's for recording, she sighed. Again? We haven't had a proper date night in weeks. I frowned, mentally reviewing our calendar. We went to that new restaurant just last weekend. That was with your parents, she countered. I meant just us. I can cancel if you want. I offered, though the thought of letting the guys down made my stomach twist. No, she said quickly. Go. Have fun. I just miss you, that's all. I kissed her then, grateful for her understanding, missing the calculating look that crossed her face as I grabbed my keys. It was the first test, a small one, and I had passed it, but not in the way she wanted. Looking back, that moment was the first loose snow shifting on the mountain. Barely noticeable, but the start of something dangerous. As our second year together unfolded, I started noticing a pattern in Allison's behavior, one that left me increasingly uneasy. Her mood operated like a weather system, sunny and warm when I prioritized her, cold and stormy when I didn't. The first major incident happened after a backcountry rescue that kept me on the mountain for nearly 30 hours. A family of 4 had gotten stranded in a sudden blizzard, and our team had to fight through whiteout conditions to reach them. By the time we got them to safety, I was running on adrenaline and coffee, my body screaming for rest. When I finally made it home, Allison was waiting with crossed arms. You missed our dinner with my publisher, she said flatly. I blinked, trying to recall any mention of dinner plans. I was on a rescue, Allison. A family could have died out there. You could have called, she countered, her voice rising. I looked like an idiot sitting alone at that table. Something hot and unfamiliar flared in my chest. I was in a blizzard trying to save lives. Cell reception isn't exactly premium in those conditions. There's always an excuse with you and that mountain, she snapped. I stepped back, stunned by the accusation. This wasn't the Allison I knew, the compassionate woman who understood my calling. Before I could respond, her expression crumpled. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears forming. I was just worried sick about you, when you didn't show up or call. My anger dissolved. I pulled her into my arms, guilt replacing indignation. I'm sorry too. I should have found some way to let you know. She nestled against me, crisis averted. But something had shifted between us. A fault line had formed beneath the surface of our relationship. After that, I noticed how she'd light up when I canceled podcast recordings to spend time with her. How she'd get that satisfied look when I declined invitations from Jack and Reed. How she'd reward my compliance with affection and punish my independence with cold silence. The pattern was building, layer by unstable layer. I just couldn't see the avalanche coming. One evening, while packing my gear for an overnight training exercise, Allison casually suggested I cut back on my rescue shifts. You're always exhausted, she reasoned. And there are younger guys who could take up some of the slack. I paused, ice pick in hand. I've been doing this for over a decade. It's not just a job, Allison. I know, she said softly, touching my arm. But I worry about you out there. Is it selfish to want you safe? The request seemed reasonable on the surface. Loving even. But something in her tone made the hairs on my neck stand up. The mountain is part of who I am, I said finally. I can't just walk away from that. She didn't push further, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. That night marked the first time I slept beside her feeling like a stranger. The podcast became Allison's primary target. At first, her complaints seemed reasonable. The recording sessions ran long. They were always on weekends. They took away from our time. Little by little, I found myself making accommodations. Moving recordings to weeknights. Shortening sessions. Editing at home so she could be nearby. Why can't they record without you sometimes? She asked one Thursday as I prepared to leave. You've done 3 episodes this month already. Because we're a team, I explained. The dynamic doesn't work with just 2 of us. She sighed dramatically. I just don't understand why those few hours are so important to you. It's not just the hours, I said, trying to make her understand. It's having something that's mine, something I created, and I'm not enough. The hurt in her voice was calculated, but effective. That's not what I meant, and you know it. The podcast gave me a connection to the outside world, a place where I could be myself without walking on eggshells. Jack and Reed were more than co-hosts. They were my closest friends, the brothers I never had. They'd been with me through everything. My parents' divorce, my career change, relationships that flamed out. We'd climbed mountains together, literal and figurative. Lately, Jack had been giving me concerned looks whenever I showed up late or left early from recordings. "Everything okay with you and Allison?" he asked one night as I packed up. "Yeah, why?" "You seem, I don't know, tense. Like you're watching the clock." I forced a laugh. "Just busy, man. You know how it is." But his eyes said he wasn't buying it. That was the problem with friends who know you too well. They see through your bullshit. The show's popularity had been growing steadily. We'd even secured a modest sponsorship from an outdoor gear company, enough to upgrade our equipment and actually pay ourselves a small amount each month. It was becoming something real, a potential career path I hadn't anticipated. We hit 50,000 downloads last episode, Reed announced during our next recording session. If we keep this up, we could take it full-time eventually. The possibility thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. I knew without asking what Allison would think of this potential future. Later that week, I came home to find her listening to our latest episode. I froze in the doorway, surprised. "You're actually listening to it. Know thy enemy," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She must have seen my expression because she quickly added, "I'm kidding. Just trying to understand what's so special about this thing that takes my boyfriend away so often." I should have recognized the danger signs right then. Instead, I kissed her and thanked her for making the effort. Another mistake in a growing list. Halfway through our 3rd year together, I received an unexpected call that would change everything. Jack was on the line, his voice tight with excitement. "Dude, you're not going to believe this. Outside Magazine wants to feature us in their podcast spotlight section. They're doing a piece on outdoor safety shows, and we're one of their top picks." I nearly dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" "Outside Magazine. Dead serious. They want to interview all 3 of us next week. This could put us on the map, man." The opportunity was incredible. A major publication recognizing our work could take the podcast to an entirely new level. I immediately called Allison to share the news. "That's nice," she said, her voice notably flat. "When's the interview?" "Next Friday in Denver. I'll need to take the day off work." "Friday." Her tone shifted. "But we're supposed to visit my parents that weekend. We've had it planned for months." I paused, mentally reviewing our calendar. The visit was scheduled for Saturday and Sunday. The interview wouldn't interfere. "The interview's just on Friday. We can still drive to your parents afterward," I explained. "I wouldn't miss that. It's a 6-hour drive, Shane. You'll be exhausted after your interview. And you know how my father gets when people show up late to dinner." There it was, the impossible choice. A career opportunity versus relationship harmony. "This is huge for us, Allison. For the podcast. I can't pass it up." Her silence spoke volumes. "Finally," she sighed. "Fine. Do what you need to do." The conversation ended coldly, and I found myself staring at the phone, a familiar knot forming in my gut. The next day, I received a text from Reed. "Allison just called me. Said you might not make the interview because of family obligations. Everything okay?" I felt like I'd been punched. She hadn't just tried to manipulate me. She'd gone behind my back to interfere with my friendships and opportunities. Something crystallized in that moment. This wasn't love. This was control. I called her immediately. "You contacted Reed about the interview?" "I thought you might be reconsidering," she replied defensively. "Given your commitment to my family." "That wasn't your call to make," I said, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "Don't ever interfere with my work or my friends again." The silence stretched between us before she whispered, "I was just trying to help." I attended the interview. It went brilliantly. The 6-hour drive afterward was spent in frosty silence. Her parents noticed the tension, but said nothing. The article came out a month later. Our listenership doubled within weeks. Allison never mentioned it. The situation with Allison reached a breaking point when I received news that changed my financial circumstances completely. My grandfather, who had spent 50 years working as a forest ranger in Yellowstone, passed away suddenly. We'd been close. He'd inspired my love of the outdoors and taught me most of what I knew about wilderness survival. To everyone's surprise, he left me his cabin on the edge of the national park, along with a modest but significant investment portfolio. Suddenly, I had options I'd never considered before. We could sell the cabin and put a down payment on a house in the city, Allison suggested immediately, already scrolling through real estate listings. Something closer to publishing houses for my work. I stared at her, stunned by how quickly she'd moved to claim my inheritance as ours and redirect it toward her preferences. I'm not selling the cabin, I said firmly. It was my grandfather's legacy. His whole life was in that place. But Shane, be practical. It's 8 hours away. When would we even use it? I'd use it, I replied, emphasizing the singular, and maybe convert part of it into a dedicated podcast studio. The acoustics would be perfect, and we could record remote interviews with rangers and survival experts in the area. Her expression hardened. So you inherit a small fortune, and your first thought is your precious podcast? Not our future together. My grandfather supported my dreams, I said quietly. He would have wanted me to use this to build something meaningful. And I don't support your dreams, she demanded. The question hung in the air, too honest to answer without destroying what remained of our relationship. Over the next few weeks, I made several trips to the cabin, assessing needed repairs and exploring the area. Each time I returned, Allison was colder, more distant. She'd make cutting remarks about mountain men and their misplaced priorities. The inheritance had exposed a fundamental truth. She wanted a version of me that didn't exist, one that would mold himself completely to her wishes. During one visit to the cabin, Jack and Reed came along to help with renovations. As we sat on the porch watching the sunset over the mountains, cold beers in hand, Reed asked the question they'd both been dancing around. Are you and Allison okay? Really okay? I took a long pull from my beer, considering my answer. No, I admitted finally. I don't think we are. Jack nodded slowly. We've been waiting for you to see it, man. See what? That she's been trying to cut you off from everything that makes you who you are. Your work, your friends, your passion projects. Us. The truth of it hit me like an avalanche. Unstoppable and overwhelming. The fourth Christmas of our relationship should have been perfect. I'd planned a surprise getaway to my grandfather's cabin, now renovated with a state-of-the-art kitchen I knew Allison would love. I'd arranged for a local chef to prepare a special dinner, ordered her favorite wines, and even coordinated with a nearby spa for treatments. When I unveiled the plan over breakfast, her reaction blindsided me. The cabin? Again. Her voice dripped with disdain. We spent Thanksgiving there already. That was with my family, I pointed out. This would be just us. Romantic. Private. It's the middle of winter, Shane. What would we even do there? I stared at her, disbelief mounting. Snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, sitting by the fireplace. All the things you used to love doing with me. Used to, she emphasized, before it became your obsession. The accusation stung. It's not an obsession. It's my heritage. It's an escape, she countered. From me, from us, from building a real future together. Her words ignited something primal in me. Not anger, but clarity. I finally recognized the pattern that had been playing out for years. Anything I valued independently of her became a threat to be neutralized. A real future together, I repeated slowly. What does that look like to you, Allison? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like me giving up everything I care about to make you happy, while you sacrifice nothing. That's not fair, she protested. I moved to Colorado for you, and you've been trying to mold me into someone else ever since. My voice remained steady, despite the earthquake happening inside me. Someone who doesn't have close friends, or passions, or a career that occasionally takes priority. Her eyes widened. I never pushed back this directly before. The mask slipped, revealing a flash of something cold and calculating before she recovered. I'm just trying to build a life with you, she said, tears forming. Is that so wrong? Building a life together should mean supporting each other's dreams, not crushing them, I replied, unmoved by the tears I now recognized as tactical. I can't do this anymore. Not like this. She stared at me, clearly unused to this version of Shane, the one with a backbone who wouldn't be manipulated. What are you saying? She whispered. I'm going to the cabin for Christmas, I stated firmly. Alone. Why get back? We need to have a serious conversation about our future, if we even have one. I left her standing in the kitchen, my heart racing, but my mind clearer than it had been in years. For the first time in our relationship, I'd chosen myself, and it felt like breaking the surface after being underwater too long. Painful, disorienting, but necessary for survival. I spent a week at the cabin alone, hiking through snow-covered trails, splitting firewood until my muscles burned, and thinking, really thinking, about my relationship with Allison. By the time I returned to our apartment, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't end things immediately, but I needed fundamental changes if we had any chance of moving forward. When I walked through the door, Allison rushed into my arms, all warm smiles and affection. I missed you so much, she murmured, burying her face in my neck. The apartment feels empty without you. I gently disentangled myself. We need to talk. Her expression instantly shifted, wariness replacing warmth. That sounds ominous. It's not meant to be, I said, motioning for her to sit. But things can't continue as they have been. I outlined what I needed: space for my friendships, respect for my career, and freedom to pursue my passions without guilt or manipulation. I explained that the podcast wasn't just a hobby. It had become a second career with real potential, one I wouldn't abandon. Is this because of them? She interrupted, voice hardening. Did Jack and Reed put these ideas in your head? No, I replied firmly. This is me finally being honest about what I need to be happy. She was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she straightened her shoulders and looked me directly in the eyes. I can't keep doing this dance, Shane. It's exhausting, loving someone who always has one foot out the door. So I'm going to make this simple. Her voice was steady, determined. It's either me or them. The podcast, the cabin obsession, the rescue work that could get you killed, or me and the life we could build together. You need to choose. Now, after she presented me with an ultimatum, my reaction left her stunned. I didn't flinch. I didn't waver. I looked her straight in the eyes and responded in a voice calmer than I felt. That's not how love works, Allison. Real love doesn't demand that someone cut off parts of themselves to prove their commitment. But, no, I interrupted, something I rarely did. I'm not choosing between the people and passions that make me who I am and a relationship that should support those things, not compete with them. That's not a choice anyone should have to make. Color drained from her face as she realized her ultimate control tactic had failed. She'd expected me to crumble, to choose her, as I always had. She'd never anticipated that the same man who'd spent years accommodating her would finally stand his ground. You don't love me, she whispered, tears forming. You never have. I did love you, I corrected gently. But I've been loving a relationship that doesn't exist anymore, maybe never did. And I can't keep doing that. She stood abruptly, yanking the engagement ring from her finger and slamming on the coffee table between us. You'll regret this, she promised, voice trembling with rage or grief, perhaps both. When you're alone with your precious mountains and your podcasting friends, you'll realize what you threw away. I watched her storm into the bedroom, the sound of suitcases being dragged from the closet echoing through our apartment. In that moment, I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt something unexpected, relief. Like surviving an avalanche I'd sensed coming for years. A week passed after Allison stormed out. She took most of her clothes and personal items, but left enough behind to maintain a claim on our shared space. I slept poorly, but not for the reasons I'd expected. The relief I'd felt in that moment of confrontation hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened into a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. On the 8th day, my phone buzzed with her name. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this conversation needed to happen. Shane. Her voice was softer than I'd heard in months. Can we talk? In person. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown where we'd had our third date. She looked different somehow. Smaller. Less certain. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, hands wrapped tightly around her mug. About us, about what you said. I waited, saying nothing. I still believe we could have worked, she continued. If you had just been willing to compromise a little more. I compromised for 4 years. I interrupted gently. Every time, it was me changing, adapting, giving up pieces of myself to keep the peace. That's not fair, she protested, though with less conviction than before. I made sacrifices too. Name 3. I challenged, keeping my voice calm. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched between us. I loved you, she finally said, as if that answered everything. Not me, I replied. The version of me you wanted to create. There's a difference. Tears formed in her eyes, but I recognized them now for what they were. Not manipulation this time, but genuine grief for a relationship that had reached its natural end. So this is really it? She asked. Yes, I confirmed. I'll pack up the rest of your things. Jack can drop them off at your sister's place. She flinched at Jack's name. One final tell that revealed everything about our fundamental incompatibility. I hope you find what you're looking for, I added, and meant it. As I watched her walk away, I felt no urge to call her back, no doubt about my decision. Some avalanches, once triggered, can't be stopped. You just have to ride them out and hope you survive the journey. I had survived, and somehow I was stronger for it. 6 months after the breakup, life had found a new rhythm. I'd moved into my grandfather's cabin full-time, commuting to the resort for shifts during ski season and focusing on the podcast during the off-season. We'd leveraged the Outside magazine feature into a sponsorship deal with a major outdoor equipment manufacturer, and our listenership had quadrupled. Jack, Reed and I sat on the cabin's newly expanded deck, beers in hand, reviewing analytics from our latest episode. 100,000 downloads, Reed announced, shaking his head in disbelief. In a single week. We're actually making this work. The network wants us to develop a second show, Jack added. Something focused specifically on backcountry safety. I leaned back in my chair, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. I've been thinking about that. What if we collaborated with the rescue teams across different parks? Create something that could actually save lives. That's why this works, Reed said, gesturing between the 3 of us. You always push us toward the meaningful stuff, not just the profitable angles. We clinked bottles, the moment comfortable in its simplicity. 3 friends building something together, no undercurrents of guilt or manipulation. Later that evening, as Jack and Reed headed back to town, I received a text from Lauren, a park ranger I'd met during a recording session at Yellowstone. We kept in touch, our conversations flowing easily from wilderness conservation to favorite trails to the books on our nightstands. In town next weekend for that conference. Still up for showing me your famous rescue routes, her message read. I smiled as I typed my response. The prospect of spending time with someone new, someone who seemed genuinely interested in my passions rather than threatened by them, felt like fresh powder after a long snowfall. As I watched the stars emerge above my grandfather's cabin, my cabin now, I reflected on how drastically my life had changed in 6 months. The loneliness Allison had predicted never materialized. Instead, I'd found deeper connections with old friends and new acquaintances who appreciated me for exactly who I was. The mountains stood silent witness to my transformation, as they had for my grandfather before me. They taught us both the same essential lesson. Some things can't be compromised without losing your very foundation. Standing firm doesn't mean being alone. It means creating space for the right people to stand beside you. I still think about Allison sometimes, hoping she's found her way to happiness, but I've never once regretted my choice. When faced with her ultimatum, my reaction had indeed left her stunned, but it had also set us both free. Some relationships aren't meant to be saved. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go and trust the path ahead, even when you can't see where it leads. The avalanche had come, just as I'd sensed it would, but instead of burying me, it had cleared the way for something new to grow.